The rejected Omega was dragged to the trial in chains. Then Moonlight revealed the lost silver Nora. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. Nora stood before the entire pack, her chains heavy with the weight of her shame. The crowd's whispers were a cruel chorus, murmuring about her weakness, her disgrace. She had always been different, an Omega without the strength or power that her pack revered. A rejection had left her hollow, cast aside by everyone, even her family. Today was supposed to be her trial, her chance to prove herself, but all she could feel was the weight of the chains that bound her, not just physically, but emotionally. The moon hung high in the sky, its silver light cutting through the dark, casting an eerie glow on the pack's ceremonial grounds. Nora trembled, not from fear of the trial, but from the weight of all the eyes upon her. She had always been the outcast, the one that others ignored. But today, something was different. She could feel it in the air, a shift in the world around her. As the trial began, Nora was pushed forward, her chains dragging across the cold stone floor. The crowd jeered, some even throwing insults, but she couldn't hear them. Not anymore. She had learned to block it all out, to survive in silence. But as she stood before the elders, ready to face her fate, something unexpected happened. A breeze stirred, making the torches flicker, and the moonlight seemed to grow brighter, as if it were drawn to her. Nora felt the familiar chill on her skin, but this time, it didn't feel cold. It felt warm. A whisper of a memory passed through her mind, the echo of something she had long forgotten. She didn't know why, but she lifted her face to the moon, allowing its light to bathe her in its glow. And that's when it happened. A strange energy pulsed through her veins, an unfamiliar power that made her feel alive in a way she never had before. The chains that had bound her for so long seemed to shimmer and dissolve in the moonlight, leaving her standing free. The elders gasped, the crowd fell silent, and for the first time, Nora realized that the moon was not punishing her. It was awakening something within her, something powerful and destined. The moonlight revealed the truth that had been hidden from everyone, even herself. Nora was the silver Nora, a being of unimaginable strength, lost to time, but now returned to claim her place in the world. The once forgotten Omega had become something more, something destined. The trial was over before it had even begun, and in the midst of the stunned silence, a new chapter of her life was about to begin. But Nora knew this was just the start. The journey ahead would be full of challenges, but she was no longer the weak, rejected Omega. She was the silver Nora, and she would no longer be cast aside. I'm glad you're still with us as we continue Nora's journey. Now that Nora had been revealed as the silver Nora, her destiny was no longer in her own hands. The elders, who once treated her as an outcast, now looked at her with awe and fear, uncertain of what to do next. The pack, still reeling from the shock of what had just happened, fell into an uneasy silence. Nora stood there, bathed in the moon's glow, feeling the power surging through her like never before. She had always been weak in their eyes, but now, she could feel something inside her, something ancient and powerful awakening. The energy in the air felt charged, as if the very earth beneath her feet recognized her newfound strength. She could feel the pull of the moon, the call of the power that had always been her birthright, waiting for her to accept it. And yet, a part of her was still hesitant. Could she truly live up to this? Could she fulfill the role of the silver Nora? As Nora's thoughts raced, the silence was broken by the sound of footsteps. The Alpha King, known for his ruthless rule, stepped forward from the shadows, his eyes locked on Nora. His presence was overwhelming, and the pack parted to make way for him, each member lowering their gaze in deference. Nora felt a knot tighten in her stomach as he approached. The Alpha King was a figure of legend, a man whose strength was unmatched, and whose cruelty had earned him the fear of every pack in the kingdom. But today, he didn't look as terrifying as he had in the stories. There was something different in his eyes, something that made Nora's heart race. As he stood before her, the pack held their collective breath, waiting for his judgment. The king was silent for a moment, his gaze never leaving Nora. She stood tall, trying to gather the courage to meet his eyes. He spoke, his voice low and commanding, but with an undercurrent of something that Nora couldn't quite place. "The moon has revealed you, Silver Nora," he said, his words carrying weight that seemed to echo in the air. "But what will you do with this power? Will you claim it, or will you run from it like the others before you?" Nora's mind spun. She had never been given a choice like this before. Her life had always been dictated by the will of others, but now, she had the power to choose her own path. The weight of that choice was daunting, but deep inside, she knew what she had to do. With a steadying breath, Nora took a step forward, her voice clear as she spoke to the Alpha King. "I will claim it," she said, her words ringing with newfound confidence. "I will claim my destiny, and I will not run." The Alpha King's eyes softened for the briefest moment, but only Nora saw it. He nodded, as if he had been waiting for her to say those words. "Then welcome, Silver Nora," he said, his voice finally carrying a hint of respect. "Your place is here, with me." The pack gasped, whispering among themselves, but Nora stood still, her heart pounding in her chest. This was her moment, the moment when everything changed. She had been the rejected Omega, cast aside by her pack, but now she was the Silver Nora, and her destiny was hers to shape. The Alpha King turned, gesturing for her to follow. Nora took one final look at the pack, at the faces of those who had once ridiculed her. They would never see her the same way again. As she followed the Alpha King into the shadows, a new chapter of her life began. She was no longer the weak, broken Omega. She was the Silver Nora, and the world was about to see the power she had hidden within all along. As Nora followed the Alpha King through the darkened halls of the Citadel, she could feel the weight of the moon's power still surging through her veins. The transformation from the broken Omega to the Silver Nora was not just physical. It was a complete shift in who she was, and the world around her was beginning to change. She could sense the unease of the pack as they whispered behind her back, some still doubting her, but others now looking at her with a newfound respect, even fear. Nora felt a strange mixture of emotions: relief, fear, excitement, and a deep sense of responsibility. The Alpha King led her to a grand chamber at the heart of the citadel, its high stone walls adorned with ancient symbols and tapestries that told stories of battles long past. The room was vast, yet somehow it felt both intimidating and welcoming at the same time. "This is where you will begin your training," the Alpha King said, his voice deep and commanding. "You will learn how to harness your power, how to control it, and how to use it for the good of the pack." Nora nodded, feeling the full weight of his words. She was no longer just a broken Omega, no longer someone others pitted or looked down upon. She was the Silver Nora, destined for greatness, and it was up to her to live up to that destiny. But as she glanced around the room, Nora felt a flicker of doubt. Could she truly control the power that was awakening inside her? Could she become the leader her pack needed? The Alpha King seemed to sense her hesitation. "Do not doubt yourself, Silver Nora," he said, his gaze piercing. "The moon has chosen you for a reason. You are the key to our future and the future of this pack. Embrace your power, and you will see that you have always been meant for this." Nora took a deep breath and stepped forward, feeling the weight of his words sink in. She was no longer the weak, rejected Omega. She was something more, something powerful. As the Alpha King turned to leave the chamber, he paused, looking back at Nora. "Remember, you are not alone in this," he said, his voice softer than usual. "The pack will follow you, but they must see you as their equal, their leader. And that starts with you." Nora watched as he left the room, the doors closing behind him with a heavy thud. She was alone now, standing in the vast chamber that would be her new home. The silence felt deafening, but within it, she could hear her own heartbeat, steady and strong. She was no longer afraid of what the future held. She knew that she had the strength to face whatever challenges came her way. Nora turned and looked out the high windows, her eyes drawn to the moon that hung brightly in the sky. Its light bathed the land below, casting long shadows across the citadel. She could feel its pull, its connection to her, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly alive. The power of the Silver Nora coursed through her, and she knew that she was ready to embrace her destiny. The journey ahead would be difficult. There would be many challenges to face, But Nora was no longer the Omega who had been cast aside. She was the Silver Nora, and she would fight for her place in the world. And with the Alpha King by her side, she knew that nothing could stop her. The future of the pack was now in her hands, and she would not let them down. As Nora stood in the grand chamber, the weight of her new identity pressed heavily upon her. The Silver Nora, a title she never imagined would belong to her, now shaped every thought, every step. The Alpha King had left her alone to reflect, but his words echoed in her mind. He had entrusted her with the future of the pack, a responsibility that once seemed so distant, now lay directly at her feet. But Nora was not ready to face the weight of the world just yet. She needed to understand the depth of her power, to know what she was truly capable of. Days turned into weeks as she underwent rigorous training. The elders, once dismissive of her, now guided her through the ancient rituals that would unlock her true potential. The moon's power pulsed through her. Every night, and each time Nora closed her eyes, she could feel it, like a fire awakening in the depths of her soul. It was an exhilarating sensation, but one that terrified her. Could she really control it? Could she wield the power of the Silver Nora without letting it consume her? The first test came sooner than expected. One evening, as Nora practiced her focus in the courtyard, a messenger arrived, breathless and panicked. "Silver Nora," the messenger called, his voice urgent. "The pack is under attack. Rogue wolves have entered our territory. They are threatening our borders." Nora's heart raced as the messenger's words sank in. The pack was under threat, and it was her duty to protect them. The Alpha King had not yet returned from his travels, leaving Nora to take charge. This was the moment she had been training for, the moment she had been waiting for. Without a second thought, Nora stood tall, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. She had been prepared for this. The Silver Nora had never been a passive figure in the shadows. She was a warrior, a leader. "Gather the pack," she said, her voice steady and commanding. "We will defend our borders. We will not let these rogues threaten our future." The messenger nodded, running off to gather the forces. Nora followed him, her mind focused. She could feel the power coursing through her, and for the first time, it felt like it was hers to command. The pack assembled quickly, warriors lining up in formation under the light of the moon. Nora stood at the front, her body vibrating with the energy of the Silver Nora, ready to lead her pack into battle. She could feel the tension in the air, the weight of the moment hanging over them all. The rogue wolves were fast approaching, their howls echoing through the trees. Nora's heart pounded in her chest, but there was no fear. She was the Silver Nora, and she had a duty to protect her pack. As the rogue wolves charged, Nora lifted her head to the sky, calling upon the moon's power. The energy within her surged, a tidal wave of strength and light. Her body glowed with an ethereal silver aura, and the ground beneath her feet trembled. She was ready. The battle that ensued was brutal, but Nora fought with a ferocity she had never known. Her power flowed through every strike, every movement. The rogue wolves faltered in the face of her strength, their attacks weak against her. The pack fought alongside her, their confidence renewed by her presence. Nora felt a rush of pride as the last of the rogue wolves retreated, defeated. The pack had won, and it was because of her. As the dust settled, Nora stood tall, her heart still racing. She had proven herself to the pack, but more importantly, she had proven to herself that she was worthy of the title of Silver Nora. The Alpha King arrived shortly after, his presence commanding as he stepped into the clearing. His eyes scanned the battlefield, and when they landed on Nora, a flicker of approval passed through them. "You did well," he said, his voice low and deep. "You are ready." Nora nodded, her gaze steady as she met his. She had always feared that she would never live up to the expectations placed upon her. But now, standing before the Alpha King and her pack, she knew the truth. She was not just a rejected Omega anymore. She was the Silver Nora, and she was ready to lead. The future of the pack was now in her hands, and she would fight for it with everything she had. After the battle, Nora stood at the edge of the clearing, the last remnants of the rogue wolves disappearing into the distance. Her heart still raced from the adrenaline, but a deep sense of satisfaction filled her. She had done it. The pack was safe, and she had led them to victory. It wasn't just the battle she had won, though. It was the acceptance of herself, the realization that she was no longer the weak Omega she once was. She was the Silver Nora, and this was only the beginning. The Alpha King approached her, his powerful presence making the air seem heavier. But Nora stood tall, her gaze unwavering as he neared. His eyes studied her carefully, not with the usual sternness, but with a flicker of admiration. "You did well," he said, his voice deep and commanding. "The pack is stronger with you, as their Silver Nora." Nora nodded, but her mind was still racing. The weight of her new position was becoming more real with every passing second. She had always known that. Being Silver Nora came with great responsibility, but leading her pack through battle, standing in the front lines, had made her understand the full scope of that responsibility. "What now?" Nora asked, her voice steady but filled with the lingering tension of uncertainty. The Alpha King gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Now, we build on what you've done. You've proven that you're more than capable of leading. The pack needs you now, more than ever." Nora absorbed his words, feeling a mix of fear and excitement at the thought of what lay ahead. She had no choice but to step into this new role fully. She could not falter now. The pack had seen her power, and she had earned their respect, but the true test was yet to come. As the night deepened and the pack began to settle, Nora retired to her chambers. The moon's light streamed through the large windows, casting silver shadows across the room. Nora sat by the window, staring out into the vast wilderness that stretched before her. She could feel the moon's presence even now, as if it were watching over her, guiding her every step. The power within her surged again, and she closed her eyes, allowing herself to feel it. The Silver Nora was not just a title. It was a part of who she was, a force that had been dormant for so long, waiting for her to claim it. It was a part of her destiny, and now that she had embraced it, there was no turning back. The door to her chambers opened quietly, and Nora turned to see the Alpha King standing in the doorway, his posture relaxed, yet imposing. "The pack is waiting for you," he said, his voice soft but firm. Nora stood, walking toward him, her heart beating faster with the weight of his presence. "What do they need from me?" she asked, the uncertainty from earlier still lingering in her voice. "They need a leader," he replied. "Someone who will guide them with strength and compassion. Someone who will lead them into a new era." Nora met his gaze, feeling the weight of his words. She was that leader now, whether she was ready or not. "I will," she said, her voice firm, her resolve strengthening with each passing moment. "I will lead them." The Alpha King nodded, his gaze softening slightly. "I believe in you, Silver Nora." With those words, Nora felt something inside her shift, something deep and unshakable. The Alpha King had always been a figure of power, but his belief in her, his trust in her, made her feel stronger than ever before. As they walked together through the halls of the Citadel, Nora felt the eyes of the pack upon her. But for the first time, they weren't filled with doubt or disdain. They were filled with hope. She was the Silver Nora, the leader they had been waiting for. And with the Alpha King by her side, Nora knew that the future of the pack was in her hands. She had embraced her destiny, and now she would shape it. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but one thing was clear: Nora was ready. She was no longer just an Omega, no longer the one who had been cast aside. She was the Silver Nora, and she would fight for her pack, her people, and her future. The days that followed Nora's victory in battle were filled with challenges, but also with a sense of purpose that Nora had never felt before. She had claimed her place as the Silver Nora, and the pack now looked to her for guidance, their trust in her growing stronger with each passing day. But with this newfound respect came great responsibility. The Alpha King had stepped back, allowing Nora to lead in his absence, and he watched from the sidelines, observing her decisions, offering advice when needed. Nora, however, didn't want to rely on him. She wanted to prove that she could lead on her own, that she was capable of fulfilling the role that had been thrust upon her. One evening, as Nora stood on the balcony of the Citadel, overlooking the vast forests below, she felt the weight of the world pressing down on her. The moonlight bathed her in its familiar glow, but for the first time, it didn't feel like a guiding force. It felt like a burden. She could feel the power within her, stronger than ever, but she wasn't sure how to harness it fully. The Silver Nora was meant to be a protector, a leader, and Nora had fought her entire life to prove she was strong enough. But now, she was questioning herself. Was she truly ready for this? the sound of footsteps behind. Her snapped Nora out of her thoughts. She turned to see the Alpha King approaching, his tall frame casting a long shadow. His presence was commanding, but his eyes held something softer, something almost comforting. "You're troubled," he said, his voice low and steady. "You've proven yourself time and again, Nora. Why doubt yourself now?" Nora hesitated before answering, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "I've never been the one others relied on before. Now, I have an entire pack looking to me for guidance, and I'm afraid I won't be able to live up to their expectations." The Alpha King stepped closer, standing beside her at the railing. He too looked out at the wilderness beyond the citadel, but his thoughts seemed far away, distant. "You've already lived up to their expectations," he said softly. "You led them in battle, you earned their respect. Now it's about trust in yourself, and trust in the pack you've sworn to protect." Nora turned to him, her heart racing with a mixture of doubt and hope. "But what if I fail? What if I'm not the leader they need?" The Alpha King finally met her gaze, his silver eyes locking onto hers. There was a flicker of something in his expression, something that softened the intensity of his usual stoic demeanor. "Everyone doubts themselves, Nora, even the strongest of us. But what makes you a leader is not the absence of doubt, but the ability to push forward despite it. You don't have to be perfect, you just have to be real." Nora felt a sense of relief wash over her, the pressure in her chest easing slightly. The Alpha King was right, of course. She didn't need to have all the answers. She just needed to lead with her heart. And with the pack by her side, she could face anything. As Nora turned back to the view, she felt a renewed sense of clarity. The moon still called to her, its power still pulsing within her veins, but now she understood it. She wasn't just the Silver Nora because of the title. She was the Silver Nora because she had the strength to protect, to guide, and to lead with courage. The Alpha King placed a hand on her shoulder, a silent gesture of reassurance. "You'll be the leader this pack needs," he said, his voice steady, filled with quiet confidence. "And you'll do it your way." Nora nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "Thank you," she said softly. The Alpha King nodded in return, then turned to leave, his footsteps fading into the distance. Nora stayed there for a moment longer, letting the weight of his words sink in. She wasn't alone. She had the pack's support, the trust of the Alpha King, and, most importantly, she had the strength within herself to rise to the challenge. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but Nora knew she was ready. She was the Silver Nora, and she would lead her pack into the future, no matter the obstacles in her path. The days that followed Nora's conversation with the Alpha King were filled with preparation. She had been given the tools, the strength, and the support, but now it was time for her to prove to herself that she could live up to the title of Silver Nora. The weight of leadership was heavy, but she was determined to carry it with grace. She woke early each day, her mind already racing with thoughts of the pack and the duties that awaited her. The Alpha King had stepped back, as promised, but Nora could feel his watchful presence lingering, just beyond the corners of her mind. It was both comforting and intimidating at the same time. Nora stood at the edge of the citadel, gazing out over the vast wilderness that stretched before her. The mountains in the distance were covered in snow, their peaks sharp and jagged against the pale sky. The forest below was a patchwork of green and gold, and Nora could hear the distant howl of wolves echoing through the trees. The pack was strong, united, but Nora knew the peace would not last forever. Their enemies were always watching, always waiting for a moment of weakness. She could feel it in her bones. The world was shifting, and the Silver Nora would have to face what was coming head-on. As Nora stood there, lost in thought, the sound of footsteps approached. She turned to see the Alpha King walking toward her, his face serious but soft with understanding. "You've been awake for hours," he said, his voice low, as always. "I thought I might find you here." Nora nodded, the weight of her thoughts still pressing down on her. "I can't stop thinking about the future," she admitted. "The pack depends on me, and I'm still not sure I'm ready." The Alpha King's eyes softened as he stepped closer, his presence a steady anchor. "You are ready, Nora," he said firmly. "More than you realize. The pack has seen your strength, they've seen your heart. They know you are their Silver Nora. You just need to trust yourself, and trust them." Nora looked up at him, the uncertainty in her chest beginning to ease. His words were simple, but they held weight. She could trust herself. She could trust the pack. And with that trust came a sense of peace, a quiet certainty that had eluded her for so long. "Thank you," she said softly. The Alpha King nodded, his eyes locking onto hers. "You've already proven yourself, Nora. Now it's time to lead." Led them with the heart of a silver Nora. Nora took a deep breath, feeling the strength of his words settle within her. She wasn't alone in this. The pack was with her, and with their support, she could face whatever came next. "I will," she said, her voice steady. "I will lead them." And with that, Nora turned toward the horizon, her heart lighter, her resolve firmer. The future was uncertain, but she was no longer afraid. The silver Nora was ready to face the challenges ahead, and she would do it with the strength of the pack by her side. The Alpha King watched her go, his expression unreadable, but a flicker of pride in his eyes. He knew she was ready. She was no longer the rejected Omega she had once been. She was the silver Nora, and the pack's future was in her hands. Weeks passed since Nora had taken her place as the silver Nora, and with each passing day, she felt more and more at ease in her role. The pack had embraced her leadership, and while there were still moments of doubt, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. The Alpha King had not interfered, allowing Nora to make her own decisions, but his presence remained a steady support in the background, his guidance always there when she needed it. The trials, the challenges, and even the victories of those early days had shaped her, and with each victory, Nora's confidence grew. She began to understand the true power of the silver Nora, not just the strength of her wolf, but the strength of her heart, her mind, and the trust she had in the pack. One evening, as the sun began to set, Nora stood in the training grounds, watching as the pack practiced their combat skills. The warriors moved with precision, their bodies fluid and strong, their movements sharp as they fought with each other in mock battles. Nora's gaze swept over the group, her eyes lingering on the warriors who had once looked down on her, now fighting under her command. There was a sense of pride in the air, a sense of unity that she had never felt before. The pack was no longer just a group of wolves. They were a family, and Nora was their leader. But even as she stood there, watching, a feeling of unease settled in her chest. The future was still uncertain. The peace they had fought for was fragile, and there were enemies who were watching, waiting for their moment to strike. Nora knew that no matter how much she had accomplished, the true test of her strength was still to come. As she turned to leave the training grounds, a figure appeared at the edge of the clearing. It was the Alpha King, his dark cloak trailing behind him as he approached. Nora felt a rush of emotions, gratitude, respect, and something more, something that still lingered between them, unspoken. "You're doing well," the Alpha King said as he stopped beside her, his eyes scanning the training grounds before turning to meet hers. "The pack is stronger under your leadership. I've seen the change in them, in you." Nora nodded, her heart swelling with pride at his words. "Thank you," she said softly. "I've learned so much from you, from the pack." The Alpha King's expression softened slightly, a rare glimpse of something more vulnerable beneath the surface. "It was never about me, Nora," he said, his voice low and steady. "It's about you. You are the silver Nora. The strength you've always had was always inside you, waiting for the right moment to be revealed." Nora felt a warmth spread through her at his words, and for a brief moment, she allowed herself to believe them. She had always felt like an outsider, always second to everyone else, but now, she knew she was the one leading the pack, the one guiding them toward a future of strength and unity. "But we can't forget," the Alpha King continued, his voice hardening slightly. "The challenges are far from over. There are forces out there who won't accept this peace, who won't accept your place as Silver Nora." Nora's gaze hardened, the sense of unease returning to her chest. "I know," she said, her voice steady. "But I'm ready. I've fought for this, for the pack, for the future, and I won't let anyone take it from us." The Alpha King studied her for a long moment, his eyes searching hers as if weighing her words. Finally, he nodded. "I believe you," he said quietly, his voice tinged with something that Nora couldn't quite place. "And so does the pack." With that, he turned and walked away, his form disappearing into the night. Nora watched him go, a mixture of emotions swirling inside her. She wasn't just the Silver Nora now, she was the heart of the pack, the one they turned to for guidance and strength. The road ahead would not be easy, But she was ready. She had her pack, and she had herself. And that was all she needed. The moon hung high in the sky as Nora looked up, its light shimmering on the horizon. The future was uncertain, but Nora knew that with the strength of her pack, with the trust in her own heart, she would face whatever came next. The journey had only just begun. The days that followed Nora's declaration of strength were filled with both triumph and preparation. She had claimed her role as Silver Nora, but the true test was far from over. With the pack's future on her shoulders, Nora knew that each decision she made would shape the path ahead. The Alpha King had left her to lead, but Nora could feel his presence in the back of her mind, watching over her, guiding her without interfering. The training, the strategic meetings, and the daily responsibilities weighed heavily on her. But Nora had come a long way from the broken Omega she once was. Her confidence had grown, not just because of the power the moon had granted her, but because she had learned to trust in herself. One evening, as Nora walked through the citadel, she could feel the tension in the air. The pack had been prepared for anything, but the recent whispers of rogue wolves on the outskirts of their territory had escalated into something more dangerous. Nora had always known the pack would face threats, but this felt different. The enemy was no longer distant. They were closing in, waiting for the right moment to strike. She stood on the balcony of the citadel, gazing out into the night. The moon's light reflected off the landscape, casting long shadows across the ground. It was beautiful, but the beauty felt distant, almost cold, compared to the weight of the responsibility she now carried. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden presence behind her. Nora turned to find the Alpha King standing there, his expression unreadable. He had returned sooner than expected, his dark cloak swirling around him as he approached. "Nora," he said, his voice deep and steady. "The situation with the rogues has escalated. We must prepare for battle." Nora nodded, feeling the seriousness of the moment settle over her. She had led the pack in skirmishes, but this was different. This was a full-scale threat, one that could potentially bring the pack to its knees if they were not careful. "What do you suggest?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. The Alpha King studied her for a moment, his eyes never leaving hers. "We need to strike first," he said, his voice low. "We cannot let them catch us off guard." Nora's heart pounded in her chest. She knew this was coming, but now that it was here, she realized how much she had to prove. The pack depended on her leadership, and she could not afford to falter. "Then we will strike first," Nora said, her voice unwavering. "We will protect the pack, and we will show them that the Silver Nora is not to be underestimated." The Alpha King's expression softened, a flicker of approval in his eyes. "I knew you were ready," he said, a rare smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Let's prepare then. The battle awaits." Nora stood tall as the Alpha King turned and walked with her toward the war room. She could feel the tension building, the weight of the decision heavy in the air. But she was ready. The Silver Nora was no longer just a title. It was who she had become, and she would fight for her pack, for her future, with everything she had. As the pack assembled, the warriors lining up in perfect formation, Nora stood at the front. She could feel the energy in the air, the anticipation, but also the trust in her leadership. They believed in her, and with that belief, she felt the power of the Silver Nora surge through her. The battle ahead would be fierce, but Nora knew that she could face it with strength and courage. The time had come to lead, and she would do so with the heart of a true Silver Nora. The rogues had no idea what they were up against. As Nora stepped forward, her pack following her every move, she knew that no matter the outcome, she had already proven herself. She was no longer the rejected Omega. She was the Silver Nora, and her place was here, with her pack, leading them into victory. In this epic werewolf tale, follow the journey of Nora, a once-rejected Omega who rises to become the Silver Nora, a powerful leader destined to protect her pack. After a series of trials, battles, and internal struggles, Nora embraces her true power as a werewolf, proving that she is no longer the weak, broken Omega everyone once thought her to be. As Nora steps into her new role, the challenges intensify, and the pack's future relies on her strength, courage, and wisdom. The Alpha King, who has always been a distant figure, recognizes Nora's potential and stands by her side, offering his guidance but allowing her to lead. Together, they face rogue werewolves threatening the pack's safety. and Nora must make critical decisions that will shape the future of their kind. As the story unfolds, Nora learns that true leadership is not about power alone, but about the trust of her pack and the confidence she finds within herself. This thrilling werewolf story combines elements of destiny, loyalty, and strength as Nora embraces her fate as the Silver Nora, ready to defend her pack and her future. With each chapter, the stakes rise, and Nora's transformation from an outsider to a powerful werewolf leader becomes an inspiration to all. Will Nora and her pack be able to defeat their enemies and secure a future of peace and strength, or will they be torn apart by forces beyond their control? Discover the power of the Silver Nora. In this gripping werewolf saga,